Hey reader, welcome back to the channel. This is Centaur here, and today we are taking a look at the armored infantry options for the Americans and the special selection rule that they receive. It's kind of an interesting one because obviously, like, there are different types of armored infantry. You've got like armored infantry proper. You also have armored mortar infantry, armored machine gun infantry. There's all different kinds, but they all share one rule in common. And this rule, in my opinion, is actually pretty good if you like building armies a certain way, okay? And so taking a look at this, what this is designed to reflect is kind of mechanized squads of various kinds who were commonly escorted by kind of anti-armor infantry support. And so instead of monkeying with the actual rifle platoon structure itself, which third edition tries really hard not to do, and I appreciate that, that's fine. Instead, they give you a rule so that if you run certain things certain ways, you get access to additional stuff. And so if you look on in the Armies of the United States book, pages 33 to 34, because again, there are multiple squads that have this special selection, special rule, you'll find it there, but it's quite simple, really, right? You get access to an additional bazooka team in the same platoon for each of the squads that you take. Okay. Now, they do give a little, comment here of like only in platoons that allow bazooka teams to begin with. I can't really think of any platoons that wouldn't allow it unless you're talking like early war uh, platoons, right? Because in early war, if I'm not mistaken, the bazooka doesn't come online until the mid-war. And so, which is why, complete aside, when the invasion of Guadalcanal happened, the American Marines were using boys anti-tank rifles, which you cannot take in bolt action unless you use the Zern mission pack, because the Zern mission pack allows you to take anti-tank rifles with the Americans. But in this case, again, a relatively simple concept, right? It's technically free, by the way, because you typically have to pay extra points for other stuff. These are typically for other people. And so, for example, the American standard armored platoon that you see here pays an extra +1 point per man to get mechanized infantry, right? And so, you get the ability to mount and dismount slightly more easily. You also take less hits when you're coming out of a transport. So taking a soft skin transport is a little less dangerous. But technically, the extra selection special rule is free. It doesn't cost you anything, which is really quite nice, right? Now, there are some squads that do limit you to only one of these squads per platoon. So I think the mortar squad, the machine gun squad, both of those are one per platoon. But technically speaking, if you ran, the standard armored infantry one, which you see over here reproduced on the right, doesn't have a limit. So technically, if you have a rifle platoon with 4 armored infantry squads of various kinds, you could have a mortar squad, a machine gun squad, and 2 standard armored squads, or it could just be 4 armored squads or anything in between. You could technically run your 1 standard bazooka for having an anti-tank slot, plus up to another 4 if you wanted to, giving you a whopping 5 bazooka teams if you really, really want them. Now, I don't think anybody needs quite that many. I feel like I run a lot more than most people by running 3. So I don't feel like one strictly needs to have it. But if one wanted to, this is not necessarily a bad way to do it. So answering the question, does this help much? The answer is kind of yes, it does help. If for no other reason, then it gives you access to an asset that can be useful and it's free, right? But also, like, even if you don't quite optimize on this, it can still be quite useful thing to do. Okay, and here's the reason why. First of all, just for the actual armored infantry unit themselves, the baseline unit, the fact that they take less wounds when coming out of transports that are being destroyed is already really good, right? Because now you're suffering maybe 1 to 2 wounds, right? So, which instead of suffering potentially, 2 to 4 wounds is a really nice thing, right? And that assumes that they don't just roll 1 dice, right? If they get a 1 or 2 on it, they might have removed a regular infantryman, but if they only get the 1, there's a reasonable chance they don't get anything, right? Which is really nice. In addition to that, being able to have a better chance of running or advancing to and from a transport is also really, really nice. But in addition, and this is the thing I kind of want to park on, is the bazooka access, because bazookas are one of those polarizing things. There are a lot of people out there who think bazookas don't work, and fair enough. I've had a lot of not success with bazookas, and in general, if the bazooka could be taken as cheap as a Piat and have a reduced range, but still be exactly the same, I would take that with the Americans in a heartbeat, because I never use them at the full 24 inches. I always use them within 6 if I possibly can. And so the result is that in my mind, The big benefit behind running these armored infantry, other than the fact that they can be mechanized, is the fact that you can completely cut out the need to take a heavy weapons platoon, right? Because as long as you're taking a bunch of these infantry, you can remove the need to field a roughly 20-point platoon commander plus whatever 2 compulsory units you wanted in order to field an additional several bazookas, right? Now we can instead pay plus 1 point per man, right? Or something like that for a couple more squads that are already in a rifle platoon. They're still doing the job of infantry squads, right? Give them a BAR if you want to. You can give them some submachine guns if you want to. But the goal is, hey, now we've got ourselves a squad that can still do squad stuff, but is also allowing our rifle platoon to be bigger and thus allowing us to drop even more stuff in on the enemy. Okay, quite useful. It also can offer up to 2 light machine guns in the case of the machine gun squad, which is exceedingly rare for Americans, right? Just in general, it's the Americans struggle to even get 1 light machine gun. Most of the time, they're using BARs. Now, personally, I like BARs, but LMGs, they got a good amount of volume. They maintain that volume for a pretty long period of time, and it's extremely rare for the United States. But even more so, it is exceedingly rare. In fact, I can't think of a single other American unit that gets this, that gets access to 2 light machine guns at regular. Most of the LMGs are limited to either 1 for an airborne squad or a veteran squad of various kinds. And the result is being able to take 2 light machine guns on a regular unit. So you're paying sub 100 points to get, 2 rifles and 2 light machine guns is pretty nice, right? And if you choose to add an extra man, you get 2 extra shots because you add that 3rd rifle in. So just in general, I think it's kind of nice. It also does give you access technically to an embedded light mortar. This is also pretty rare. Most armies in the game don't get access to an embedded light mortar, right? Japan, Belgium, the British, the Americans, there really are not very many. And more than, and this is, I think, an interesting thing in light of the fact that the Commonwealth book dropped and that we'll be talking about Commonwealth armies at the end of the week. And we're going to keep doing those, I think, roughly on Thursdays for most of the next coming weeks. It's because I feel like everybody has their books now. So now I think it's fine for us to talk about it. I'm not spoiling anything if you really wanted the book. But just suffice it to say, in the Canadian list, they get access to the First Special Service, I think, the FSS squad, the Devil's Brigade, which was kind of a combined Canadian-American squad, as I understand it, with different trainings and different people brought different specialties. And one of the results of that is that you can embed a bazooka into a veteran infantry section. Okay? I do wonder, even though it's only like an extra 45 points in order to do that, so it seems pretty cheap, I do wonder if maybe having an extra bazooka team is actually better. And here's just a couple of reasons why. First of all, because you get the extra order dice, which is really nice. Second of all, it's the kind of thing where you can, kind of moderate how much cost you've put into something. So if somebody opens up on a squad with submachine guns, they're not removing an extra 45 points worth of bazooka by removing that squad, right? So it feels better to me in those respects. It also means that the places where you might want a bazooka may not necessarily be where you want a rifle section, because you may want to be like, okay, well, I'm going to rush in there. I'm going to shoot this tank. I'm going to blow it up. And even if they counterattack me, they remove 60 points worth of regular bazooka, right? Which is really not that much. Whereas if you're throwing like a, above 100 point infantry section, they jump in there, say they do blow up a tank, the opponent might actually get reasonable comparable value for wiping out the squad that has the bazooka in it. So in my mind, because I want to say that the FSS squad, I think they start with like behind enemy lines and tough fighters and field crafters. So it's like 15 points a man. And I think you have to take them with at least, it's like 4 to 6 people. So like it's a lot of points, plus 45 points on top of that for the bazooka if you want to add it. So like you could easily be the same cost as a light tank. Easily. And that assumes you're only taking like a, 5-6 man squad, right? But the result is that I'm not sure that that's necessarily better. It obviously will keep the bazooka alive, and you're less likely to cough up an order dice than in Seek and Destroy, for example. If you have the bazookas embedded into a 6-man squad, taken veteran, because that's the only way to take it with Canada, as opposed to taking it, say, regular, all on its own as 2 men, right? They're not going to last all that long if you do it that way. So the result is that just in general, I tend to think, personally, I think I like the extra bazooka team option over and against embedding it, but I can see the value in doing that. But suffice it to say, in my mind, I think this is an extremely useful ability, right? If you take, two trucks, right? Two light trucks or something like that, and you end up putting, your armored infantry in those, and then, you take two armored infantry squads to fill those trucks in, and then you end up taking your standard bazooka in your rifle platoon plus two more. You can throw those guys in a company commander into an M3 white scout car. And now you've got infantry that can be quickly rolled up and dropped off where they need to be in order to do fire support for your army. If somebody does blow up the soft skin transport, they aren't taking that many wounds coming out of it, which is really nice. And then you drop a bomb on them that can absolutely obliterate armor in a small area. And has a heavy machine gun in the case of the M3 White Scout car. So, I tend to think there's a lot of value here that you can really get, again, for free. The armored infantry squad is not paying for this. They're paying an extra plus 1 point for mechanized. The other ones that are not mechanized are paying extra points because you have to start with the light mortar already in there, and you have to start with, I think it's one light machine gun already in there. But you kind of get the idea, right? Like you're paying extra points. It's not as simple as just a simple 5-man squad. In fact, these are 6-man squads, if I'm not mistaken. Except I think maybe the mortar squad. I feel like the mortar squad might be 4. But it's going to be more expensive than you might imagine just because there's hard baked costs already in there. But it's not as expensive as trying to field an entire heavy weapons platoon. Flip side, because I can hear people saying this, and it's true, heavy weapons platoon is one of the strongest platoons for Americans, mostly because of the heavy weapons rifle section. And so you're not necessarily bad off by taking a heavy weapons platoon. But if you don't want to, if the points just don't work out to get everything that you quite want, but you still want that relatively versatile, relatively cheap Pen plus 5, which is actually quite expensive to get in American lists, because they tend to come on larger American armor and they tend to be hard baked with other special rules, right? I mean, even the Chaffee, which is one of the least expensive ways to get it because of fast, on top of the medium AT gun on that light tank chassis, you're looking at, I mean, almost the cost of 3 bazooka teams, right, to get a single Chaffee. So, it's, I think there are reasons to take bazookas. I think there are not. I think there are ways to use them wrong. Maybe we'll even do a tactical video talking about that someday. But suffice to say, leave your thoughts down below. If you have thoughts on it. Again, one of the biggest questions about how effective this is do you like bazookas? Because mechanized on its own is fine, right? It's worth the 1 point you're paying. The free bazooka access, I think, is an interesting opportunity. The question is just whether you want to pay that opportunity cost. But what do you think? Do you think that armored infantry are just not as flashy as Rangers, and thus you're not going to run them, or they're not as cool as Airborne, so you're not going to run them? Is this the kind of thing you run regularly and you really love, and you're a little bit surprised more people don't run these? Let us know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.